and the bitter house brew for me. And we talked. We laughed. I didn't use charm or suggestion because that would have felt a bit dirty. It was just a drink that turned into a date. At one point she did this cool flippy thing with her sword and sheathed it without standing up. Show off.
You liked it?
I smiled. Then it was over, and I was a bit sad about that, but I wasn't going to push my luck. I followed her out of the tavern and stuck my hands into my pockets. Hey, listen, I had a really nice...
Walk me home, she said.
Okay, I said, my heart trying to squeeze 3 beats into the space of 1. Chapter 2. I followed Wendy uphill, not weaving but deliberate in my quest not to slip on the slick cobbles. It seemed to rain at least once a day in Harrowick, whether it was a constant frigid sprinkle or a cloudburst that drowned out all the city sounds as it hammered the slate roofs. Unlike New Viridia or even Weirdtide, Harrowick didn't have a standardized system of streetlights. Rather, individual houses hung a small lantern from a hook, usually between the first and second floors. This wasn't enough to keep the entire street lit, but it provided islands of illumination one could navigate between, and roughly defined the wandering road.
See something interesting?
Wendy asked. Streetlights.
What about them?
I suddenly felt stupid for getting hooked on such a small detail. I was just comparing this place to New Viridia. They have oil lamps instead of lanterns.
They have slaves.
It was my turn to look at her questioningly.
The lamps have to be filled and lit. In the capital, since they're evenly spaced in the center of the street, the government pays for the oil and labor. They use slaves. It's cheaper to provide room and board than a living wage.
I see. Wendy snorted.
In any case, Harrowick is less popular with the nobility. It's too cold and wet, too hard. So there's no slave market. Each resident is required to light a lantern from sunset to dawn, and the price of oil is regulated by the city magistrates, so it's a tax, but the individual is held responsible.
What's the punishment for not lighting it? Wendy shrugged.
In theory, a fine and public service.
And in practice?
Thieves target dark houses, even if they're often the poorest families on the block.
That's rough. But then, so was slavery. I guessed there was always going to be someone at the very bottom of the ladder. I just didn't feel comfortable with the idea someone was shackled to the bottom rung. We passed through a gatehouse in the first inner wall. The main portcullis was closed, so we used a narrower side passage and our shoulders bumped together. I glanced at her, and we shared a small smile. The guard saluted Wendy as we passed. You're in the Legion? I asked.
Inquisition.
I raised an eyebrow, and she looked at me, suddenly sober and as sharp as a razor. I grinned. I guess you've had your hands full then. There was a big fight in the Lower East a couple days ago. She huffed.
I wasn't there.
Really?
No, Alan, I'm making it up just to throw you off guard.
It just seemed like your kind of thing. You know, sword fights and alarum.
What's alarum?
Usually someone running screaming for people like you to come help. She chuckled.
Well, I was out of the city. I got back today, gave my report, snuck in a quick training session, and headed to Martha's for a drink. I'm on the path to become an Inquisitor errant, so I spend most of my time on patrol. Less intrigue, more monster slaying. I like my foes in front of me, within sword reach.
Which was roughly where I was.
It's not a problem, is it?
She asked. Nope. I was intimidated, sure. Little bit turned on, too. I grinned. As long as I'm walking you home, not to a jail cell.
The righteous have nothing to fear,
she said, giving me a wink.
That's what the seneschal always says.
I'd met him. Didn't care for him. He must have a lot of friends. Wendy didn't answer. I knew her type, professionally, from the real world. She was honest, a bit rough around the edges, and she hated politics. She was probably good at what she did, though she would...